to prepare for the 2021-2024 three-year LCAP, which is the Local Control and Accountability Plan cycle. Acknowledging all the difficulties and barriers surrounding our current school situation, let's have an open conversation around what stakeholder engagement will look like for the next LCAP cycle to suggest and explore action steps we can take to bridge those gaps. Our presenters today are Annie Murphy, who is doing our tech and recording. She has been in education for over 20 years. She began her career as an elementary school teacher. Over the course of her career, she has been a teacher coach as an administrator of data and assessment, an assistant principal at both elementary and middle school levels, a director at a district office, and a site principal before she became part of the Santa Clara County Office of Education team in July of 2019. Her background in various roles brings experience and understanding in supporting school districts in their continual growth. And we have Dr. Dawn River, who started her career in education 25 years ago as a paraprofessional. For more than 10 years, she was an elementary school teacher. In those 25 years, Dawn has also served as a teacher, coach, mentor, intervention teacher, and has worked at the district office level as a state and federal programs coordinator. In 2017, she joined the Santa Clara County Office of Education team as the coordinator of state and federal programs and supports districts in the county and region with continuous improvement and support of students through equity and family engagement. So welcome.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for coming today to our Stakeholder Engagement Roundtable. One of the purposes for this is that we will hopefully, the people in this group, feel free to turn your camera on if you want, you don't have to, but unmute when there's time because we will want to hear from you. So to start that, we just like to know who is in the room. So if you want, I think we have a very small group. So if you just want to turn off your mic and let us know, if you're a parent, if you're an administrator, a teacher, a liaison, a paraprofessional, just what your role is.
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay, awesome.
Hi.
Hi.
I can see my cat. Okay, so I'm sorry. My name is Hilda. I am a parent, but I'm here as a liaison. I work at a high school level.
Okay, great.
Sorry for my dog.
Oh, no worries.
Good morning. My name is Paula Sagun, and I am a community liaison with the Oak Grove School District.
Okay, great. Welcome.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
My name is Veronica Ponce. I am a community liaison for the Santa Clara Unified School District, but I am a parent.
Okay, great. Great. Well, we're happy to have you all here today. And I think I got everybody. Yeah? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we will get started. So just to begin, we just like to know, this year, all the districts had to complete what was called a learning continuity plan, and you might have heard about that and help with that. And that was in place of the LCAP, part of Senate Bill 98. And so if you were part of that, what we'd like to hear is what kind of successes did you have for engaging your stakeholders? What were some areas of growth, things that you thought, okay, next time we could do this better, and what ideas might have emerged? So thinking about as we go forward with our districts and helping them with their LCAPs and other different types of engagement, what ideas emerge that you think could possibly help? So if anybody had any help or supported the district in their learning continuity plans, we know it was a short time frame for when districts had to complete them. And so we'd love to hear from you, just if you had any successes, areas of growth, and how you helped out.
I actually have a question. Are community liaisons at the district level always involved in the LCAP planning?
I think it probably would depend on the district, but they should be. it's helpful to have them because that's how you're going to get your parents involved, right? They're going to be the ones helping to reach out to the community to share that information. Don, do you have any other information around that or thoughts?
So I would say in the cases that I have been involved with, they were not necessarily part of the planning, which could be very helpful for the district, but they were sort of the conduit between the parents and families and the district. So let's say the district team would say, hey, we want to, focus on this attendance area to get parents to come to our meeting to talk about LCAP. And so the liaisons would go out to that community and try and help get the parents to engage in the meeting. What I think is possibly a missed opportunity is that they could get them to be part of the process for the planning of the engagement. So being part of that, how will we reach out to families? How will we engage and gather input? Not necessarily the decision-making of the LCAP, but the planning process of how they're going to do the stakeholder engagement. And so I think that's why Annie and I are here today to sort of help you all figure out how to be part of the planning process and not just the information relayer to parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how to give yourself more of a voice in the planning and, giving ideas so that districts see that, oh, hey, we need to bring everybody to the table when we're developing our plans.
Yeah, so none of you were part of the learning continuity plan stakeholder engagement?
No, I think in my district, in the Oak School District, I feel like, or as a community liaison, my role and my work is more localized to the schools that I'm assigned to.
Okay.
And that's where, it helps parents participate when they have to, through different groups, through the DLACs and the other committees at the school level. And then from there, principal gather the input information from parents, and then also to reach out to parents so they can help fill out the surveys for the LCAP. That's pretty much, the involvement that I have in my district.
Thank you for sharing.
I am from San Jose Unified. This is only my third year as a parent liaison. And this is the first year that I heard about that and that we have been invited to the meeting where they talk about that. So I think I heard about it last year, but we were not involved at all. So this was the first year that we've been invited to the meetings and just not as much as to make decisions or vote or anything, but just to be part of the group and of course give our opinions about what we think. And like she said, to bring parents and to engage parents in the meetings. But again, every district is different, and the way the district thinks they work is not the same in the school. So we might be considering this year, maybe the district is trying to pull us, the parent liaisons, as part of, but then at the school is not happening. So it's a learning process.
Communication too, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully through this presentation, we'll be able to share some ideas that you can bring back to your districts, right? To increase that engagement of all groups. So I'll actually go to the next slide, Dawn, for you, right?
Okay. Yeah, so we know this year is different. So there may be a different type or level of involvement in the past when it's in-person meetings and more need to gather parents in. So we're hoping, and what we do is we support and advise districts of how to do these things, of how to, gather stakeholder engagement, how to write their plans. So we're involved in the process with them in many different aspects of LCAP, but also other things. We help them sort of tie all the district things to the schools and to the systems that they have in place. So we're always trying to help districts to come up with new ideas and new strategies to implement the things that are required, but also implementing things that are just good practices. So I just wanted you to understand sort of our approach here. So stakeholder groups. So there are some groups for different types of stakeholder engagement that are required. And there are some that it's just really good practice to get people involved because they're part of the system. They're part of who interacts with ultimately your end customer, which is the student, right? Like all of the things that a district does and that parents do and that the administrators do is to support the students. So, you know, this is a list of groups that we always encourage the districts to interact with, not just have meetings to tell things, but to get them to be part of the discussion and the planning and the decision making, because that's truly what stakeholder engagement is. You're engaging stakeholders because they're a part of the system and what's happening within the district. So parents and especially the DLAC and ELAC at the school site are one of those required groups. They're an essential group for interacting with students. The English learners are a group of students who are recognized as a group that districts will provide extra supports to. So it's especially important to interact with parents of English learners, right? So parents understand what those special and extra services are for their students. But also to gather sometimes left out groups of parents to ensure that they're part of the input and the decision making as well. So in some cases, depending on the level, students are a stakeholder group. So I don't know if it's necessarily in elementary, but from, you know, upper middle school to high school, students can really be a great stakeholder group because they're the ones receiving all of the services and programs in these plans that you're getting feedback for, right? And so asking students is really important because they're the ones that are participating in what the district has these big plans for. Teachers, of course, because they're the ones implementing all the things you're going to say that you're doing for students. Teachers are the people that are doing it in general. So there's also some classified staff that are also a group of people who are implementing those things that you're writing in plans. So, you know, the leadership team, which means principals and directors and coordinators and all of those people, they're generally a group. And of course, the community, because the school lives in the community. And although, you know, the community doesn't necessarily have a say in what happens in a district, it's a great means of communicating with them all the things that you're trying to do, because as you improve the schools, you improve the community.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm also a classified staff person in a school district. And a lot of times classified staff are just kind of left out and we're not provided with time to be on committees. You know, we don't really have access to subs for our jobs sometimes. So do you have hints about how to get classified more involved?
Sure. Well, I think one of the ways that we're trying to work with districts to sort of help this happen is helping them plan when the stakeholder engagement is. So, you know, sometimes, you know, the stakeholder engagement for employees happens during staff meetings, during other things. And sometimes that can leave out classified staff because, you know, they don't necessarily get paid for extra meetings, but in the same way that they would arrange a meeting for parents or for students, we would want them to plan some sort of stakeholder engagement where, whether it's with the rest of the staff or whether it's them as a group on their own to be able to talk and discuss amongst their peers. You know, it's always something that we suggest. It's not something we can't require districts to have groups with each individual group, but sometimes the practice is that they'll have a representative from each group. So it might not necessarily include everybody, but it may be some representatives from different attendance areas where there's 1 or 2 people that are sort of the voice for others. It's not something that we encourage because we want everybody to be able to have a voice, because these plans like LCAP and the federal addendum and all these things are a system-wide thing. And so it affects everybody within the system. Want to add to that, Annie?
Yeah, and going off of that too, like Dawn said, a lot of times districts with the one representative, they have the union, someone from the leadership, their union, so CSEA or whatever, whatever the classified union is, those leaders go to the meetings, hear what's happening, and then the goal is for them to share back with their staff, just like with teacher unions as well. Because right, teachers, like if it's a district level thing where they need feedback, you don't always have all the teachers there. You might just have a few representatives. Right. And one thing too, I would advocate for yourself too. If you're at a school site, talking to the principal about, is there times during the day, during your hours where they could set up, maybe, when they're developing their LCAPs or their school site plans, if they can set up time during the day to have like, a 30-minute conversation with all classified staff to share the plan with them. And so those are some other options is, just reaching out to whoever is in charge.
Yeah, may I share something? I think in regards to, for example, in parent groups, I think many times community liaisons, because we are classified staff, and that end up being the representatives of the classified group and be part of those meetings. But there are some other meetings like the school site consult, meetings like that normally they are after school. And those meetings are open to everybody. I think that sometimes the issue is that communication. And I do feel like classified staff, because in other areas that is not parents, sometimes things happen and we end up not really hearing about it as a classified group. We only hear it through the grapevine, right?
Sure. Okay, so this slide talks about what a district will do to plan for these meetings. So as they're planning what they're going to do with their stakeholder groups, they have to determine what they need to get from that group, right? And so we know that different groups are going to have different kinds of conversation. The group of students will talk about different things than the group of leadership or the group of parents or the group of teachers. The conversation will not be exactly the same conversation because it's a different perspective and a different point of view, and they're at a different piece of the system. So when districts are planning, we encourage them, think really about what you'll need from that particular group. We don't want them to plan one thing and do the same thing with everybody, because you're not going to ask teachers the same questions you're going to ask students. You're not going to ask parents the same questions you're going to ask a group of principals. They're different groups and they have different perspectives and different roles within the school system. So we encourage districts to really think about who they're talking to for that particular meeting and what information they need from that group. And then knowing that may change how you collect the information. For some groups, you may have a digital way of collecting. For some groups, you may have a very tactile paper way if you have an in-person meeting. You may, we'll talk about the ways of collecting information, but you want to tailor the way you're going to collect the information to the group that you're meeting with. And then we always encourage districts to only ask questions that they need answers to. So if you ask very general questions, you might not get the information back from the group you're talking to address the need of the plan, right? Or of the topic that you're talking about. So we encourage them to be very specific about what they're asking and not say, hey, what do you want for the 2021 school year? Because that could be the world, right? But if they're asking about their LCAP and one of their goals is on early literacy, then they need to ask a specific question about early literacy and how that stakeholder group has participated within those actions to support that goal. So we try and make it very clear, like be specific, ask the specific question you want, so you get an answer and you get data that you can actually use to make a decision.
Okay. And so going off of that, types of stakeholder input options. So we know right now with COVID, it's a very different time, right? In previous years, we'd had large meetings, everyone would come and gather. And I mean, you could have a lot, the one paraprofessional that was on the call that from Oak Grove, right? They would have them after school and everyone would show up. And so now that we're in COVID, we're not able to do those in-person meetings at this moment. They may, depending on health guidelines, may be able to open for small groups, as long as everybody's socially distanced and spread out and wearing their masks. And we may start to see that happen. But there's a lot of other types of input options that we can receive that feedback from parents and whatever group that you're trying to get. And actually, some of these options might make it easier for people to attend, right? You're at home and you have your kids and you're like, I can't go to a meeting tonight because I have to, I've got my kids, I have to help them with homework, I have to cook dinner, or I have other things I need to do. So it might not be easy for you to get in the car and show up, and it might be difficult for some families. So some of the options are virtual, like we're having our Zoom, this webinar is on a Zoom. And so everyone is able to attend from the comfort of their home, listen, ask questions. You might have a hybrid where the meeting, there are some people there, maybe let's say it's a district level. So you might have some of the district level administrators all in a room, but then they are presenting it out to everybody. So not everybody's there to gather feedback. You could have surveys or questionnaires that go out. Google Forms is a great option and it's free and it's really easy to use. And it creates a sheet for you at the end and puts all your information in it. So it's very user friendly. People use SurveyMonkey, and then making sure that however you're doing this, so that the translation, that you have it, that it's available to those that need it. Because you want to make sure that you are giving access to all families. And I know districts, if you have, for certain language, if it's a 15% population, but if you know that you still have other families, as much that you can translate meetings is, like Dawn was saying, it's a good practice, right? You want to get the feedback from as many people as possible. You want to make sure that you are sharing out whatever goals and actions that the district has created. Whether, like Dawn saying, LCAP, federal addendum, SIPSAs, school safety plans, there's lots of different things that need to get shared out to the community that people may not know about. And so we have to think about how many ways that we can get this out to stakeholders. Dawn, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, it's also important to understand that, especially in this virtual time, where there's other things that you need to know to be able to do these things virtually, you may need to have a meeting before just to talk about the technical aspects. We're going to ask you to click on this. This is how you enter, this is what happens when you go into a breakout room. This is how we're going to gather information. So you need to, unlike an in-person meeting where you can put up posters and hand everybody Post-its and say, write your ideas down, that has to happen in a different way. So you may need to do an informational meeting about how you're going to gather input before you get there. Because it can be very, already you're asking people to read information and to give input on things. So perhaps you'll have a pre-planning meeting with the public and say, we're going to talk about these 3 things. Can you read it before we have the meeting? So we can spend the time really discussing and getting your opinion. And we're going to use this way of collecting information from you and show them on the screen how you're going to collect the information. So it'll take a little bit more planning, but having, the person who's going to translate or the community liaison to be there to be able to say, we need you to explain to parents that this is how we're going to collect the information. So if they need help, we need them to attend this meeting so we can show them how we want to gather their input. So it's a little bit more planning than if you had an in-person meeting, because in an in-person meeting, it's easy to describe. But it's also good practice if you want somebody to comment on a document to give them the document before they come to the meeting. And so it's actually a good practice to talk about it before you want to actually gather the input. So on the meeting before, you talk about those logistics and say, hey, by the next meeting next month, please have read this, because this is what we really want to spend the time talking about.
Mm-hmm. And really quickly, I forgot to mention too, the other thing, like Dawn was saying, you know, taking the time to let everyone know ahead of time. Another option is that you record whatever whatever you're trying to explain, whatever you're trying to share, you record that, and then you have it, and then, you know, there might be links to feedback or surveys, and then you have that open for a while. So parents and community and, you know, whoever you're trying to get input at has an option of when they have time to sit and watch whatever it was, in case they can't make the virtual meeting, in case they can't make the in-person. And so this just gives you a more opportunity to get that message and share it out. Like you were, like it had been mentioned, right? Not all groups are included, and it's hard to, and you sometimes don't know, like classified may not know what's happening. But if there's options where there's video messages recorded, this is another way to get that input and share that message.
Yes.
Okay. Is this my slide or yours? I don't remember. I don't know.
I'll talk about this one.
Okay, this is yours. Okay.
So the big stakeholder push happens with LCAP. LCAP's the big plan. It really tells the public and the people within the district what's going to happen, where the district is focusing, how funds are being spent to support students, all of that. So LCAP is the big deal, right? It's a 3-year plan. There's some requirements with Ed Code. And so there's a lot of planning and implementation that comes with that. So how we're supporting districts is we're suggesting to them that they sort of practice what they think might work. So there are other things within the district, some plans and some meeting opportunities that they can have stakeholder meetings where they can practice these things, right? So it's not going to just magically happen. If we're in a new world, if we've never had a DLAC meeting over video, we might want to practice it with something that doesn't necessarily have less impact, but is potentially ways to practice and improve before the LCAP process starts, right? And so these things are things that districts can do. They have to have DLAC meetings. They're going to have some stakeholder engagement with parents for the budget overview that's due in December. So these are opportunities for the district to practice. If they want to do a video conference and they want to, you know, collect input with a survey, they might want to practice it in one of these other meetings. So as we work with districts to help them prepare, because we're already talking with them about what we're going to start working with them in February. But we're suggesting to them, use the opportunities of these other meetings, school site council meetings, ELAC, DLAC, stakeholder engagement for budget overview for parents. They may want to give like an overview of what LCAP means before they actually start talking to people about LCAP, right? And so there are opportunities to practice their stakeholder engagement. How are they going to reach out to parents? How are they going to conduct the meeting? What ways are they going to collect input? So we're actively working with districts to encourage them to practice these techniques, because it's absolutely not the same as an in-person meeting.
Can I put in a plug for adding PTA meetings as a practice?
Oh yeah.
Opportunity.
Yes. Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. PTA Home and School Club. Absolutely. That's another really important opportunity, because like you have different parents that attend different meetings. And so that's a great place as well.
Yeah. And I mean, if this was happening earlier, we would have said like back to school night and other things like that. We were thinking about things that could potentially happen before LCAP, but you're absolutely right. PTA is a great one. We can add that to our slides later.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I used to do, when I was a principal with we had our LCAPs, I always presented like 4 of the meetings throughout the year was on LCAP for my parents, because some attended that and they wouldn't necessarily attend school site council or my ELAC meetings. So it's just another great opportunity.
Yeah, and if you're a Title I school, you have to have at least one annual parent meeting to talk about Title I. So that's a great opportunity to practice, but also have that group be stakeholder engagement.
Yes. Yeah. And like Dawn was saying too, that mini LCAP 101 is another opportunity, maybe not necessarily just you're engaging your stakeholders and learning about what's coming up, right? And that's really key because we want to make sure that everybody understands, like when they go to these meetings, they have the full picture of everything. And so I think when Dawn was saying that was a great idea, that just to let people know ahead of time.
Yeah, and again, it's so that specific stakeholder meeting can be discussion, and you don't have to do as much explaining or background knowledge that could take up half the meeting with questions. You could have a meeting before that gives an overview of what it is, and then a preview of what you could possibly ask them or what you'll want to talk to them about. So then they're ready to actually give that time for really good discussion and question asking and you know, concerns. All of those things can be spent at the stakeholder meeting, as opposed to half of it being background and half of it being input, because it never leaves enough time for people to really talk and discuss and give input on everything that you'll need input on. You know, some of these LCAPs are like, you know, 150 pages. It's a lot. And so if you are able to give that information before the group comes in for engagement, it's a really great, you know, as a teacher, you learn about preview, teaching, and then review. You can use that same process with stakeholder engagement, right? You preview the background information on what you want the input on, you get the input, and then afterwards you say, okay, last time we talked about this, any more feedback, any more, you know, questions that came up after we had discussion. It's a great old school teacher strategy that works when you have to interact with people with things that you need them to respond back.
Okay.
Just a quick time check. We have about 20 minutes left.
Yep. And we are actually nearing the end. So
yes, we're in good shape.
Yeah, we talked about how to engage groups, right? So what are the ways you can engage them to get information? And we know sometimes people don't like to share out in groups. We know from our own thing. We'll sit on Zooms and ask people to share, and sometimes you get nothing. And it's like crickets. And so we want to make sure that there's different opportunities for people to share where they feel comfortable and where you can engage them and they can give feedback. So I'm going to show you something really quick called a Jamboard. It's through Google. And I'm going to click on this. It's going to take us to Jamboard right here. And this is a sample Jamboard. And so you can create whatever you want on here. You have right here's a little text box. So you can, you know, type in your.
Make a statement or a question.
Yes, or question, right? And then people have these great little sticky notes. So they click on the sticky note. They might, you know, I'm just going to put thank you. And then they click and they could pick whatever color. These are your color choices. So let's say we want pink today. And so then you click save, and then you can hit, it'll take you out. And then there's the thing, the sticky note appears on the Jamboard. And so this is really great to collect information on how, like Dawn was saying, you put a question on the top, then people can just respond. And no one has to feel like that you know, everybody's watching them, because it doesn't show you, I don't know necessarily who did the sticky note. So people might feel a little more comfortable sharing that way.
Right. In the same way that you would have those Post-its in a poster and people could go write, people can feel free to write in their primary language and you can get those translated. So you want to give the opportunity to give input without necessarily talking into a camera in front of everybody, right?
Yes.
So this is a great way. It's free. It's easy to set up. You would just need to show the participants how to click on the link to get to it. But you know, you could leave it open for a certain amount of time and say, okay, this is going to be open for 30 minutes after the meeting. So if you don't add anything during the meeting, make sure that you use it up to 30 minutes after. Encourage people to write in whatever language they want to write in. And then, you know, you can talk through the input, and people who want to talk at the meeting will talk, but people can then discreetly go over there and give their input and be part of the process.
Mm-hmm. You can have, if you know, for interpreters, making sure that you have interpreters on board. We know some districts use language line if they don't have enough on staff. And like I mentioned earlier, if you know that you may not have a large a group of parents or community that speak a certain language, then the language line is great, right? Because that way you can, I think it translates into like 36 languages from
Right.
what my experience with it. And it's another option. And like we're doing today in our Zoom, you can always save any of the chat. So like if you want to pop in questions into the chat for everyone to answer, then people can answer. That's another option. Zoom polls, which if you're the host of the Zoom, you can create polls where you, let's say you're just trying to get like with this, I know a lot of districts right now are talking about their reopening plans, right? As they're getting ready to bring students back, and they want maybe just some quick feedback on how parents are feeling. Like, yes, I feel comfortable. No, I don't feel comfortable. Or, you know, I'm in between. And you're having, let's say you were, you know, was a board meeting or something, you're presenting that, you could just quickly throw out a Zoom poll, see how people are feeling, and then you're able to save that information as well. And these are just other opportunities to find out how people are feeling, get their information, but where someone doesn't have to talk to everybody out loud or in front of everybody, because, you know, not everybody is comfortable with that. Some people do not like to talk in large groups.
Yeah, and these are ways where if you're having a meeting, you can interact, but we still encourage other polls or surveys to be sent out there for people who can't attend the meeting. So you want to give multiple ways for people to be able to participate and engage in case they can't participate at the time of the meeting. So, you know, what we do as a team is we record and then we give people access to watch the video of the discussion that happened, and then perhaps a parent could answer the survey after that.
Mm-hmm.
So just making sure that not only are you trying to reach out to people in different ways, like through phone and email and, you know, whatever parent portal blasts, those type of things, but also multiple ways to interact with them to gather information. So don't just send a survey, because not everybody will access that. Have an opportunity for people to talk and ask questions, have an opportunity for people to listen, but maybe participate on the side without actually having to verbalize their questions or concerns or feedback, right? And so you want to think not just multiple ways to reach out to get people to participate, but also multiple ways to participate.
I have a question.
Yes.
I think one of the challenges that throughout the years I always face is that for some of our families to feel like their word or what they have to say matters. So sometimes I feel like they shy away from that because they think that it's not that important, or that they don't have something important to say, but they do. So
Yes.
I think that's one of you have any suggestions and how to do better in that area?
Well, I think, as you know, Dawn was saying too, like giving options where you encourage them, like, you know, the different ways, it like not just necessarily face to face, but through email or through, you know, if you were to create a Jam board or some kind of thing, and letting them know that your voice and your thoughts on this, it does matter. It makes a difference, because when we hear what the parents are thinking, what students are thinking, you know, teachers, classified, as we're at like the district level, you know, administrators are making these plans, and if they're hearing from people and maybe their idea, they're like, oh yeah, this is going to work great. But then they start hearing from people over like that, oh, you know, this is not what people want. This is what we're hearing. And so that their voice does matter. It's, you know, every voice matters. And it's really important, I think, to encourage them to say that, and to let them know it doesn't have to be worded perfectly. You know, that's not what we're looking for. We want to know your thoughts on this, because as a part of this district community, your information is important to us. And that's how we develop our plans, right? Think about like at a school site, when a principal's creating their SIPSAs or their school plans or their LCAPs, they want to hear from everybody, because when you're sharing out, or if things, you know, you don't want to hear later, parents are upset that, oh, why did you do it that way? I didn't have a chance, you know, this way you can say, you know, yes, we had multiple feedback, and this is what we gathered from our feedback, and this is why we're going this direction.
Well, and so this is also why you, the community liaisons and teachers, are so important, because you're the ones that often have the personal connection to families, right?
100%.
And so even developing a process where you take whatever questions were asked at a meeting and you have a phone call with a family and just gather information from them directly. You can, have the survey up and help talk them through what their feedback would be for the survey, and you help enter the information in. Making that personal connection is so important, which is why part of the reason why we always try and include community liaisons when we talk about stakeholder engagement, because often you are the ones that are making the phone calls when kids are sick, making the phone calls to say, hey, can you come into this PTA meeting? And so connecting those two pieces is really important. Aside from sending out the mass email or the flyer in the mail or whatever, it's getting, if you're at a DLAC meeting and you're going to talk about attendance, the community liaison is the one that really helps with that piece of it at a school site. And so you would want the community liaison to be a part of that connection. Even if the parents can't go, you can still connect with them on the topics that happened at the meeting. And so changing it from just like those necessary routine phone calls to the connection making phone calls can be really important, right? If you can call and, reach 10 families that weren't able to show up to a DLAC meeting, it's 10 more people that are able to give feedback on something that they wouldn't necessarily give feedback. And so we think that looking at that aspect of it outside of the normal meeting input box is really important, which is why community liaisons were invited to this today.
So I think, oh, go ahead. I think I'm just gonna put our Q&A sign
We're
on.
at the questions now.
Yeah, so bring them on.
Yeah, perfect. We have about 11 more minutes.
Question, opinion, sure. One of the issues that I lead the CLAC meetings at my site. And one of the things is that it becomes very boring for many families because we have to cover mandatory topics, and these are the same topics that we review every year. And we're talking about families that are being CLAC since their kids were in elementary.
Or they have multiple students, right? They have multiple kids, so they continue to stay on. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it is a big issue because we have to cover those topics. They have to vote, but they don't want to do it because they've been listening to the same lyric for years and years. So they just not interested anymore. On the other side, if I invite to a meeting for something else, for a workshop for how to use the parent portal, or a workshop for whatever topic, yes, they will show up. It's just as soon as they see the CLAC or DLAC, everybody's like, eh.
So that's something that we've talked to districts about, because you can have an ELAC meeting, but call it LCAP engagement or call it something else, but you're targeting that group of people. So you don't have to advertise it as ELAC, right? You can advertise it as input for the district's plan for next year, right? And so it gives that different spin. It's not like you're tricking people to come, but you want people to know that it's not the normal meeting, but you want them to attend. So I've told some districts, like, say it's, parents of English learners, stakeholder engagement for LCAP. You're gonna target similar people to ELAC, and you can write on the agenda later that it's an ELAC meeting, but when you advertise it and ask people to come, you don't have to call it an ELAC meeting, right? Because parent engagement is parent engagement. And so, I think being strategic that way, because if people think that it's going to be the same old topics, they might not be motivated to come, right? But if you say, we're going to ask you to participate in this discussion about our plans for next school year, it's something different, right? It's not the same mandatory annual topics that school site council and that ELAC and DLAC have to talk about. It may incorporate some of those things because a lot of those things occur in LCAP, but if you put the message out there in a different way, perhaps you'll strike interest, and that again is where you all, community liaisons, come in to say, you know, there will be some of the same people that come to ELAC, but it's really important because we need to hear your voice.
Mhm.
In
Yeah.
districts,
That's what I've been trying to do the last 3 years, incorporating the CLAC with another small workshop. So we always
Yes.
have a different topic after the meeting, and
Perfect.
that it is challenging.
Yes. Definitely challenging.
I was going to say it's also if the district could be very specific about what they want feedback on, it
Mhm.
might draw someone who's really interested in that topic.
Yes, and so
Yes.
that's one of the pieces of advice that we give to districts all the time. Like, wait, don't ask questions that you don't want the answers to, right? Don't ask for feedback on something that you don't need feedback on. Be very specific. So if you need input on, you know, 2 of the 5 goals of your LCAP, ask questions about those things. Don't
Right.
ask about everything. Don't ask about, you know, the experience of your child since kindergarten, because you won't get the information that you need. So you can in other meetings when you're talking about other topics, but if you're doing stakeholder engagement, the purpose is to get questions and feedback and concerns about what you're planning to do. So we always encourage to ask very specific questions, to get data and to ask similar questions across stakeholder groups so you can put that data together and be able to make a decision. And so, you know, it's important to also like talk about what the limits are of the district. There are budgetary limits sometimes. There are human capital, like you don't always have the people to implement something on the scale. So we encourage a lot of discussion about what's possible, right? And so to not open it up to the world, because we all want the best for students and teachers, right? They're the ones that are doing, like, they're the crucial piece of the system. But because of budgets and people power and space and all of these things, there are limits. So being very clear about what those could possibly be, or if there's a choice between doing one thing or another thing, to be very clear about that, you know, it's impossible to do a lot of things really well. You have to start out by doing a few things really well and seeing if it works. And, you know, we use data, we use demographics, we use participation and feedback to understand whether they're doing well. And so being able to explain that to your stakeholders and help them understand that although you want to do the world, this is what we can do during these 180 days. And this is how we're planning on doing it. Is really important. So never ask questions that you don't need the answers to. Only ask questions. And we always suggest have it over multiple meetings. Don't have one stakeholder engagement. If you have a 200-page plan, you're not going to get the answers you need in 1 hour. It's impossible. It's physically and mentally impossible.
And
so,
people get frustrated because you're rushing through the plan, and then people are like, well, I can't. It doesn't give people time to process and think.
Right. So that's where that preview thing becomes really important. This is the section of the plan we're going to talk about next, you know, in 2 weeks. Please look it over and write down your questions so you can ask, or write down your concerns so you can express those. And then the next time this is what for next time, preview these pages, this to this. And we're going to talk about those pages next time. Because believe me, I've worked at a school district, and the person in charge decided to show our 220-page plan to parents at the meeting and get feedback. And, you know, obviously I had my concerns, but I wasn't the person in charge of the meeting. So, you know, after that experience, we figured out that we needed to do it in a different way. And so, you know, now is the opportunity to try out those things that districts want to try. So, you know, if you give suggestions saying, hey, you know, for all those parents that aren't able to make it to the, you know, November, whatever meeting, how about if you give me some questions and I can make some phone calls or have a smaller Zoom with this list of people and gather that feedback for you. for those who aren't able to make it, because, you know, I mean, there are limits for the district too. They can only have so many meetings too. Right. And not everybody's going to be able to participate that you might want to participate. You know, maybe you're focusing on a group of African-American families that don't always come to meetings. Maybe you're focusing on, you know, the 3rd grade Spanish speaking parents, you know, thinking about it strategically, you know, finding out who's attending the meetings and how you can strategically reach out to those people to get feedback from them, because clearly there's some reason they couldn't make the meeting, whether it's work or childcare or internet access or whatever, but maybe you could reach them on the phone and get that feedback, you know? So thinking, we really need to think creatively now that we're not able to call a meeting in person. And I mean, that was challenging in itself. I actually think for us, even, we get more participation now that people don't have to drive to San Jose to meet with us, right?
Definitely.
So thinking how we can accommodate more options is important.
So when it looks like we have 2 minutes left. So I'm going to share with you this last slide. Well, there's 2 more slides. Dawn's going to drop into the chat box a link for the feedback survey that Jamie would really like everybody to fill out, just to get so that once again, we get feedback on how our participants felt about today's
Oh, Elena, did you already do that for us?
I did. I think
thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
So just some important tips as as you guys are liaisons. And so, you know, even sharing out with your district being like, hey, I know that the LCAP's coming up and you're going to want our support because we really want to make sure we include our stakeholders, is document those meetings, times and dates when you have them. Really important. Start looking at the calendar now or in December to when are you going to start, like as Dawn was saying, schedule meetings, because you do not want to have it all one meeting only. So you want to make sure you schedule them out over time and that you have a schedule, like you begin to put that out, and you can share that with people ahead of time so that they know in the next few months, these are the meetings we're having. These are the topics that are going to be discussed. And so people can schedule their own calendars.
Yeah, I mean, the requirement is 72 hours, but let's be honest, if I knew 3 weeks in advance, I would be more likely to put it on my calendar than 3 days before, right?
Yeah.
And so as early as you can post it and let people know, the more likely they'll put it on their calendar, put that reminder, and then you can send them a couple of reminders like, hey, this is the meeting schedule. Please try and attend one of these.
Right. And then the LCAP template, that's something that will be released in January for districts so that they'll get started. And then at the county office for like assistant superintendents and things, we're having an LCAP relaunch training, which I don't have the link in this, but it's on our website. So,
yeah. So we're going to be talking to them about these things.
Yes.
So we're not only going to talk to them about the document, we're going to talk to them about stakeholder engagement. We're going to talk to them about gathering input. We're going to talk to them about looking at data. And so after this date is when they're going to start doing some of the things that we talked to you today about.
So that meeting is for the leaders?
Yes, and then we'll be encouraging them how to reach out to their liaisons and get you guys involved more, because that's really our goal. Is how do you get your liaisons, you know, because you guys are, like Dawn was saying, a crucial part of this puzzle, right? You guys have those relationships with the families, the one-on-ones, and that's really what we need.
Yeah, so it's possible that we'll have a very similar session to this during our training.
Yes.
It says return to main session. Are we going to be able to answer the survey after we return?
Yeah, as long as you have that link, you're good.